In the fall of 2022, a disabled 300-pound Air Force veteran in his mid-70s by the name of Craig Robertson posted the following message on Facebook from his home in Provo, Utah. Quote, "Hey, Merrick Garland, you demented weasel. Send your FBI SWAT team to my house." Less than a year later, Merrick Garland did exactly that. Shortly before 6 a.m., a heavily armed FBI SWAT team showed up at Robertson's door. They brought an armored vehicle with them, along with night vision goggles, ballistic shields, a mechanical boom that they used to shatter his windows. Dozens of agents then launched flashbangs and barged into his home without even giving him the opportunity to get dressed. When Robertson awoke, startled, officers say he pointed a handgun at them. They quickly shot him several times, killed him, and dragged his body onto the sidewalk, where it remained unattended for several hours. As news of the killing spread, various members of the media, including one of my producers, filed records requests so that we could see the FBI body cam footage of this shooting, but we never received it. The FBI acknowledged that the footage exists, but they've refused to share it. To this day, we still have not seen it. The FBI insists that the information cannot be released, saying that it might interfere with some vague, unmentioned law enforcement proceeding. Meanwhile, as they hid the evidence, the Biden administration celebrated what they had done. The neighbors were horrified, but the Biden White House was thrilled with the outcome. Craig Robertson, they said, had threatened Joe Biden's life in various Facebook posts. And because Biden was visiting Utah that day, the FBI had no choice but to assault the man's home, even though he was crippled. Watch.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation has launched a review into the deadly shooting of a Utah man during an FBI raid on his home on Wednesday. Agents were attempting to serve arrest and search warrants on 75-year-old Craig Robertson after they say he made credible threats to kill President Biden and other Democratic public officials. The deadly incident unfolding just hours before President Biden landed in Utah for an event.
The tipping point to me was President Biden was coming. He was going to be in close proximity. And this individual looked like he was on a planning path to carry out the attack.
A federal complaint full of screenshots details the dozens of threats Robertson allegedly posted on social media, one of them just 4 days ago. Quote, "I hear Biden is coming to Utah, digging out my old ghillie suit and cleaning the dust off the M24 sniper rifle."
We're glad that nobody in law enforcement was hurt. This is really not about just the rhetoric. It's about the actions that can sometimes go with that rhetoric.
Biden's spokesman is just happy that no law enforcement officers got hurt. He's grateful that this terrorist mastermind, this crippled 75-year-old morbidly obese man who needs a cane to get around, was taken out without any loss of innocent life. What's left unstated by Biden's spokesman and by the corporate media is that more than 6 months before this pre-dawn raid, FBI agents watched Craig Robertson drive to church, which he did every week, and they saw him hobble with his cane and sit down in the pews and attend a service and then hobble back home. And then when he got home, the agents asked him a series of questions about his Facebook post, to which Robertson replied, "Don't come back without a warrant." So they were tracking this guy for the better part of a year. They knew his routine. They knew of his physical condition. And they knew that he was highly paranoid about law enforcement, justifiably so, it turns out. Therefore, whatever you make of Robertson's Facebook posts, and some of them were probably illegal under the law, it's obvious that the FBI had no reason whatsoever to besiege his home before 6 a.m. as if he was Osama bin Laden. I mean, they could have just walked up to him on his way to church, put him in handcuffs, could have placed him under surveillance to see if he really was going to suit up in camouflage and try to assassinate Joe Biden. They could have taken his cane away and told him to go to sleep. I mean, they could have done anything. All of these options would have worked perfectly fine. But it's obvious why Joe Biden's FBI decided against taking any of those steps. They wanted to kill Craig Robertson. They knew he would grab his revolver if they tried to break into his home at 6 a.m. They knew his response would give them the pretext they needed. And then as they sprawled Craig Robertson's lifeless body on the sidewalk, they'd be able to send a very clear message to every other so-called MAGA Republican in the country. You know, just months before Robertson was shot, Joe Biden, as you remember, flanked by Marines in front of a blood-red background, declared the MAGA Republicans to be the single greatest domestic terror threat faced by In no uncertain terms, Joe Biden ordered his entire administration, including the FBI, to pursue MAGA Republicans as if they were, members of Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And that's exactly what the FBI's field office in Salt Lake City did when they attacked the home of Craig Robertson. They were following Biden's orders. Now that the Biden administration is out of power, it's easy to forget about the story of Craig Robertson, the story and about the video that they still have not shown us. But we shouldn't forget about it for several reasons. First of all, obviously, it's a reminder of what Democrats will do if they ever return to power. They won't simply imprison their political enemies. They will happily kill them if they can concoct any justification for doing so. But there's now another reason to revisit the case. Over the weekend, as you may have seen, Democrats held a series of so-called No Kings protests in various locations across the country. Now, yes, they were sparsely attended, and many of the attendees were old, pathetic geezers, but these protests still served a purpose. They allowed Democrats to openly call for the deaths of their political opponents. And these were not the idle online threats of a disabled 75-year-old man. They were threats of violence that were made in public and in broad daylight by people and by a movement that has the capacity to carry them out. Many of these people were demonstrating their allegiance to Antifa, which is a known terrorist organization. Now, in a moment, I'm going to show you some of these threats of violence. And as you watch them, ask yourself, why haven't any of these people been raided by the FBI at 6 a.m.? Why haven't FBI SWAT teams showed up to any of their houses? Why haven't any of them had their windows demolished by armored vehicles before they can even put their clothes on? And that's not to say these people should suffer the same fate as Craig Robertson. I'm certainly not saying that the FBI should concoct a pretext to kill any of these people. I don't think the federal government should operate that way. But at the same time, as long as we're pretending that the rule of law still exists in this country, you'd think they'd suffer some consequences for breaking the law, just as Craig Robertson supposedly broke the law. And yet, as far as we know, none of the leftists who made threats of violence have even been questioned by federal authorities, much less arrested, much less attacked in their own homes at 6 a.m. This is footage from the perimeter of a No Kings protest in downtown Chicago over the weekend. Christopher Sweat with Graystack Media shot this footage. Here it is. Watch it.
You gotta grab a gun. We gotta turn around the guns on this fascist system. These ICE agents gotta get shot and wiped out. The state machinery, that's a full display right there, has to get wiped out.
You got to grab a gun. We got to turn around the guns on this fascist system. These ICE agents got to get shot and wiped out. The same machinery that's on full display right there has to get wiped out. Now, in the longer clip, the man says that killing ICE agents is necessary to ensure justice for black people and working class people and, of course, Palestine. Now, by any measure, this is unlawful speech. The man should be arrested. The Fed should seize all of his computers and his cell phones, figuring out who he's been coordinating with, if anyone. We need to know if anyone is funding him. These are basic steps that need to be taken to ensure that more conservatives aren't assassinated by people like this. So is anyone taking those steps? And we have no idea at the moment. Certainly there's been no statement from the DOJ that this person has been arrested or that his home has been raided. The man has supposedly been identified by random internet detectives as a staff member at Wilbur Wright College, which shouldn't be remotely surprising. Some of the most deranged, violent leftists work in, academia. But we don't have official confirmation at this point, even though we should have it, about who this guy is. We should have official confirmation because we should have a mugshot of him because he should be in jail right now. We need to see mass arrests after these so-called protests. Here's another threat of violence. This one was captured by Brandy Cruz of the Undivided podcast. The footage is from Seattle. Watch.
Who are you going to kill?
Nazis.
Who do you define as a Nazi?
What do you mean? It's pretty...
In this context, who's a Nazi?
Stephen Miller's a Nazi.
So you're going to kill Stephen Miller?
If I had the chance, yeah, I would.
I don't know if that's something I'd say on camera, bro.
Now, there's another video that Brandy Cruz uploaded shortly after this one in which a random middle-aged guy who looks relatively normal says basically the same thing. He agrees that it would be, quote, justifiable to murder Stephen Miller. Again, this is the prevailing sentiment on the left right now, in the mainstream. Now, the FBI is apparently aware of this footage, according to Brandy Cruz, but we don't know exactly what that means. The FBI certainly hasn't released a statement saying that they've arrested this person, thrown him in solitary confinement where he should be. He's a political terrorist. He's a suspected political terrorist. He should be in Guantanamo Bay right now. And until that happens, they might as well do nothing at all. And until there's an actual crackdown on these people with a tenth of the intensity of the Biden administration's crackdown on conservatives, nothing will change. They'll continue threatening us and killing us with total impunity. And indeed, that was the entire point of the so-called No Kings protest. This is footage from Chicago in which a woman mocks the assassination of Charlie Kirk as Kirk's supporters drove by. She mimes a gun shooting someone in the neck. Watch.
Hey! You ever heard of Ozempic, you fat ass?
Now, in probably the least surprising development of all time, this woman has been identified online as I'll give you one guess, a public school teacher in Chicago. There's no official confirmation, but her reported school, Nathan Hale Elementary School, apparently just deleted its X account and took its entire website offline. So that seems like confirmation. And also confirmation that you should homeschool your children immediately, or at least take them out of public school, if that's where they are. You know, a huge number of public school teachers think like this. They're truly demented individuals, and they want your children to be demented just like they are. And there's a very high likelihood that if your child is in public school and you're a conservative, his teacher wants him dead and you dead alongside him. And it's just the reality. And again, this woman belongs in prison. She's threatening Charlie Kirk supporters to their faces. It's unambiguous. So why hasn't she been arrested? Where is the SWAT team for her? Why aren't we throwing every single thing we can at her? Why not every look through the book to find every single law that she may have theoretically broken and charge her with all of them? Make her life a living hell from now until the foreseeable future. Legally. Why isn't that happening? You know that creepy feeling you get sometimes like you're being watched while browsing online? Well, here's the thing. You actually are. Every time you hop on the internet, your service provider can see literally everything you do. And get this, in the US, they can legally sell your entire browsing history. Yeah, even that incognito browsing isn't so private after all. Who would have thought? That's why I started using ExpressVPN. It's this brilliant app that encrypts everything I do online and routes it through secure servers. Since I started using it, my internet provider can't see any of my browsing history, which means they got nothing to sell because they got nothing on me. Whenever I'm on the road, whether it be at the hotel or airport, I always use ExpressVPN on my computer. You can never be too careful, and ExpressVPN makes being cautious super easy. But here's what I really love about ExpressVPN. It also hides my IP address so that those annoying data brokers can't build a profile about me to sell to advertisers. Plus, it's incredibly user-friendly. You don't have to be a tech wizard to use it. They made it so simple that even your kids could figure it out. All you got to do is tap one button to get protected. They got the apps for all your devices. It's rated #1 by CNET, The Verge, and other major tech reviewers. Find out how you can get up to 4 extra months by scanning the QR code on screen. Click the link in the description box below or by going to expressvpn.com/Matt Walsh Show. Now, we'll run through a few more examples of leftists glorifying violence at these so-called protests. Some of these don't rise to the level of criminal conduct necessarily, but they do give you a sense of the prevailing sentiment on the left. This is footage from the Main Wire. Watch.
So this is your birthday, so you came out on your birthday, you thought it was important. Tell me why.
Absolutely, because I have 2 little boys who deserve a bright future of freedom and democracy. And this is a nightmare that I'm living in, and I'm here to make a difference and to be loud and proud. And there's no other way I'd want to celebrate my birthday than with my parents and my best friend fighting for our country.
So, okay, so for a birthday present, what do you hope happens? you wake up tomorrow morning.
I hope that I see the obituary that we're all waiting for tomorrow. That's what I hope for.
You wishing that President Trump is dead?
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things you probably noticed watching this clip is that the woman seems happy overall, out there on her birthday, smiling. Other than being massively overweight, she seems normal enough. And then, without missing a beat or changing her sing-songy demeanor in any way, she says that she'd be thrilled if the President of the United States is dead. And the woman behind her clearly thinks the same way. This is the kind of woman that if you passed by her in the grocery store, she would seem to be smiley and friendly. And you would say, oh, you see, our political divisions aren't that bad. It's all online. It's all on X. Out here in the real world, things aren't so bad. Yeah, little do you know that this same woman will cheerfully tell you, oh, yes, I want my political enemies to die. Oh, for sure. This is mainstream on the left. I don't know how many times I have to say it. I don't know how much more evidence we need. Now, of course, if this woman really believed that she was living in a fascist empire under a king, she wouldn't be allowed to protest at all. And she certainly wouldn't be happy smiling for the cameras as if she's out for a picnic. She wouldn't be joking around with her friends. And she would not be saying, yes, we're living under a fascist dictator king, and I hope he dies. If you have a fascist dictator in charge and you say that, it'll be the last thing you ever say. This is the absurdity of it. All these people, we're living under king, under a dictatorship, and I hope he dies, and let's rise up and kill all of his, and kill him. The fact that you're able to say that is all of the evidence we need that there is nothing approaching a dictatorship in this country. So how do we explain this inconsistency? I mean, one way to think of these protests is that for a large contingent on the left, they're an opportunity to do something with their very empty and dysfunctional lives. They don't believe in God. Many of them have damaged relationships with their family and friends, if they have relationships at all. A lot of them are, they hate their parents. They are divorced. They just totally dysfunctional lives. They're profoundly hateful people, indistinguishable from demons, really. They've been affirmed and indoctrinated for decades, even as the central promises of their ideology, one by one, have turned out to be lies. So in their boredom and nihilism, they attempt to express themselves through aimless, astroturfed protests about a monarchy, even though we don't even have a monarchy. Without any guiding principles or morality and without any fear of consequences, they have no problem making death threats or making light of death or expressing their death wishes. It's entertainment for them. It's all they have left. Now, that's presumably why this elderly man, for example, showed up to a protest dressed as Charlie Kirk's assassin. A normal man of this age would be playing with his grandchildren, or, going to church or reading a book, tending to his garden, anything. He'd also, by this point, have come to terms with his own mortality. But when elderly, immature men haven't come to terms with their own mortality, when they don't believe in God, when they have no purpose in their lives, this is the natural result. Age and wisdom, we like to think go together, and oftentimes they do, but there's nothing uglier and more pathetic than age devoid of wisdom. There's nothing uglier and more pathetic than an old, decrepit person who has no wisdom. The one thing you're supposed to gain with age, you don't have. And instead, you're just this immature child in your late 70s, wilting away. And that describes so many of these so-called protesters. They use irony to mask their very deep-seated insecurity over their own impending demise. And to be clear, there's no age limit or age requirement on this kind of thinking. Here's the Pennsylvania Democratic Party chair in Crawford County. You can see here. She's holding a sign calling for Donald Trump to be 86th, as in assassinated. Again, it's all very flippant. They're smiling. Why wouldn't they be? They don't think anyone's going to do anything about it. In fact, they know it'll make them even more popular in the Democrat Party. The Daily Signal spoke to a woman at yesterday's protest who voiced similar sentiments. She repeated a bunch of lies about Charlie Kirk, compared him to Hitler, and said that she was grateful that he's dead. And in the same breath, she said that she's a very nice lady, a very nice person. Watch.
Something that I've heard in interviewing Republicans is that they're concerned with the health care going to undocumented immigrants. What would you say about that?
I don't know that it's true. Everybody deserves health care, and we can certainly afford it in this country. So again, they're just, they're pointing to things and saying it's our fault, we're too liberal. Yeah, it's really depressing. I don't know how anybody your age even thinks of having children, okay? Okay, millions of Democrats did not vote. Whose fault is that? We need to get ourselves together, and we might even need to be a little bit meaner, because the Republicans don't mind being mean.
And by mean, what do you mean? Do you mean protesting? Do you mean...
Maybe we have to, stop being so nice.
Because you seem like a pretty nice lady.
I'm a pretty nice lady, but I can be pretty mean, too.
Okay, and I have to ask this because people on the other side are going to say that they feel like the Democrat Party has been mean. Recently, with Charlie Kirk being assassinated,
He's a piece of garbage. Of course we were mean. I am so tired of people saying, oh, but, it's a terrible thing. No, Hitler is dead. I'm glad Hitler's dead. Evil people have no place in my world. He was a hateful human being. It was disgusting, the things that he said and did. I don't have time for that. I'm sorry. I have to point my energy in other directions.
Nice. She's a nice lady. She wants health care for everyone, but she also wants half the country to die. So just to be clear about who gets health care. That's the kind of health care that she wants for me and you and pretty much anyone watching this. This is the official position of every single true believer in the Democrat Party, without exception. All of them. Every single one. That's why there's so much footage like this. And they want you dead. They will dance on your grave. And as they do, they will tell themselves that they're very kind people. They'll claim that by blowing your head off, they're being compassionate. And they'll inevitably invoke Hitler, not because they understand history or care about factual accuracy, but because it makes them feel like they're a vital part of an existential struggle. And because it's literally the only historical figure that they know. Quote, I don't know how anyone your age even thinks about having children, says the older woman. After all, how could you have children when climate change is going to destroy the world? How could you have children when we have a king who's going to enslave all the women? How could you have children when instead you could focus entirely on yourself? Rather than raise a family, you could save civilization from the neo-Nazis who lurk behind every corner. Like all deeply held beliefs that are rooted in narcissism, these propositions fall apart the moment that you think about them for a second. For example, in this clip, the woman says that everyone, including illegal aliens, deserves health care. Again, she also wants the government to forgive student loans, punish hate speech, etc. That's her proposal at this No Kings rally. But the only way to achieve any of these objectives is to massively expand the power of the executive branch, far beyond its current capabilities. They want to force doctors at gunpoint to provide services to people who can't pay for it. In other words, they do, in fact, want a king. They just want a king who's on their side. And just to underscore that point, not that it really needs to be underscored at this point, here's a post from the website of Democrats Abroad, which has been organizing No Kings protests overseas for the past 6 months. And you can see there's the quote, a few notes. We've changed the No Kings theme of other events around the world to No Tyrants, so as not to mix messages in a country with a monarchy. We're also swapping out no crowns in favor of no clowns. Come dressed as a Trump clown. Think bad blonde wig, orange face, long red tie, or whatever gets your creative juices flowing. Yes, after months of campaigning against a king, leftists have realized that some of their favorite countries, like Canada and the UK, have a king. Meanwhile, the United States, which just voted for Donald Trump, voted Donald Trump in office with a majority of the popular vote and support of every single swing state, does not have a king. And that's obviously a bit inconvenient for the whole No Kings messaging, which is intended to protest Donald Trump. So now they've called an audible, at least in some parts of the world. It's enough to make you think that these people may not be completely honest about their intentions. This footage has the same effect, which you can see here in Seattle. Leftists dressed up as lice agents and rolled around in the dirt on the Constitution. You get it? They're lice agents instead of ICE agents. Really reaching for the puns on this one. It's reminiscent of the No Kings protests from a few months ago when leftists paid money to berate effigies of Donald Trump. This is now a well-established pattern of unhinged behavior and really cringy, lame behavior. It's not a one-off. So it's incumbent on conservatives at this point to answer the following question. How should we respond when our political opponents are openly deranged, immature, nihilistic, and most importantly, committed to murdering every single one of us? Well, here's a thought. We should not respond by obsessing over naughty jokes in a Republican group chat. We should not spend weeks fighting amongst ourselves. We should not be obsessively counter-signaling each other. And we should not be doing that when no one on the left, under any circumstance, would do the same thing. Instead, we should recall what they did to Craig Robertson, what they'll do to you. We should think about the FBI SWAT team that shot up his house because he ranted about Joe Biden, when they absolutely did not need to do that. And we should keep Craig Robertson in mind as we pursue the leftists making threats today. Not because they should suffer the same fate, but because they are far, far greater threats to us than Craig Robertson ever was to Joe Biden. And after the murder of Charlie Kirk and the celebration of political violence that just took place all over the country under the guise of No Kings protests, we should treat them accordingly. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.